Good morning. The July 21st, 2022 Ohio State Design Review Committee is called to order. Nate, would you call?
Yeah. Alex Frondorf.
Here.
Margaret Land.
Here.
Antonia Marinucci.
Here.
Chris Lozier.
Here.
Marika Clark.
Here.
Fantastic. Our first applicant is at 1836 West 25th Street. It's the Charlie's Closet Boutique Signage. Who's here to present this? Is anybody here for Charlie's Closet Boutique Signage? If not, we'll be moving on.
Going once, going twice, gone. Next agenda item.
All right, so our next agenda item is the Isaac Instruments signage.
Yes, my name is Matt Bryson, and I'm here with Brilliant Electric Sign Company, along with Laura Higgins-Wema, as well as Larry Sabek from Isaac Instruments for the channel letters on the proposed building.
You can go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, so essentially what we're looking to do today, as you see in this first slide here, this is a site plan where we're looking to have some channel letters installed to the building, manufactured and installed. It's north to northwest facing, as you can see in that plot there. It is an internally illuminated sign. As you can see, it's facing the north to northwest direction. We move to the second slide here. As you see, it is a set of internally illuminated channel letters with white faces and white returns on the, and from this position, the left side of the building, in between the first and second floor. We see further here on this next slide, this is the construction drawing and construction details of how the sign will be fabricated, as well as how it will be installed to the building. The next slide you see here correlates with the following slide as well, which will give you a few angles of the building from a ground perspective, here being an aerial perspective, to see the proposed location of where the sign would be in relation to if you were on the street or sidewalks. And there you can see some of the angles where it would be on the left side of the building, especially in photo C. You can kind of see where it would be proposed between the first and second floor if you reference the architectural drawing we had proposed. Here are further more location spots of what the different angles of the building are for where the sign would be proposed. And that's about it.
It looks from the cut sheet there that it's a little ambiguous how it'll be mounted. Is it mounted in the stick or are you proposing mortar?
I just want to make sure I confirm what I heard. Sorry, it sounds like it's cutting on my end a little bit, but you're asking how it was going to be installed to the building?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so in this case, it's going to be a raceway. The letters will be mounted to the raceway, and then the raceway itself will be mounted onto the brick.
Okay, I think we typically recommend that you mount it through the mortar joint and not through the brick itself.
That's fine.
Yeah, for the raceway attachments.
For the raceway attachments, that's no issue whatsoever.
And then the second image there, I see that the sign in total is 1 foot 8 inches at its broadest point. Is that to scale on that image of the building itself?
That is correct. It is to scale. So when you're looking at that, that is what we are proposing the size of the sign to be on the building.
And then how bright do you anticipate this sign being?
Shouldn't be too bright. The letters themselves are a translucent material. So when it does illuminate, it's not going to be a very bright illumination. It will be, as I said, translucent. So it'll be bright enough to be able to read, but not so bright that it would be distracting by any means.
So it won't be casting its own light, in other words.
Correct.
And is the power source, is it on a dimmer so that it can be adjusted if it is too bright or not bright enough, perhaps?
Not normally, but that can be.
Not normally in this situation, but that certainly could be done.
It might be a good idea just so that it could be adjusted if upon installation it looks like it's too bright or too dim, either way.
We need to confirm with our client on that, but that's certainly something we can discuss.
Those are my questions. Any other questions?
I don't really have any issues with this.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have any issues with this one. I think looking at the image that's on the screen, it seems to the scale and size of the sign seems to fit appropriately on the facade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
If there are no other questions or comments, I'll make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve with the requirement that the drawings specify that the raceway is anchored through the mortar.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
All right, Nate, call the roll.
I see Doug Wall has joined us. So Doug Wall,
Yes, I,
Alex Frondorf,
Yes.
Margaret Land,
Yes,
Antonio Marinucci,
Yes.
Chris Lozier,
Yes.
and Marika Clark.
Yes.
Okay, so it's improved with the condition that the raceway is anchored through the mortar. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Turn the chair back over to Doug Wall.
all right, Nate, let's bring the next item.
Is anybody here for Charlie's signage at 1836 West 25th? Still nobody.
Somebody's got an echo. I don't know who that is. Maybe can everybody who's not talking make sure to mute themselves?
Okay, then we'll move to our next item, which is, oh my gosh, I'm having trouble with sorry about that. Having a little trouble here, 1 sec. Okay, so our next item is 1921 West 25th Street. This is a facade renovation. And I believe Greg Frost is here to speak to this.
That's correct. I'm here. So in general, I have to not apologize, but just I have to kind of put out there that I was just recently called on this project about a week and a half ago. The owner of the building has received violations because the upper parapet wall is leaning and there are some small areas of masonry that look like they could fall off of the building. So he has a citation to do something to make it right. And then of course, the building department violations say that he has to bring the building back up and make it safe. He did contact an architect who went out and evaluated the building. And really the architect in very simple terms said that the upper parapet wall needs to be rebuilt because it is in bad shape. And because the building was built in 1885, the architect called for a full repointing of the lower sections of masonry, repainting, pretty much, a full facelift. Can we go down to the next page? This is the building. It's right on West 25th on the east side of the street. When you look at it, there's obviously horizontal books and the deli there on the first floor. the second floor, those 7 windows basically look into a vacant space. And it's funny, it's a 1,200 square foot space that really is begging to be renovated. So go on down a little bit further. And there I just really according to the drawings, I broke the project into the 3 areas. From the upper band up, that's a total rebuild. The center section, which is the second floor where the windows are, 100% repoint. They put in new windows, but they didn't trim them properly. So my proposal to the owner says we're going to retrim the windows, clean paint and caulk everything. And then down on the first floor, there are some masonry columns. Those will get repointed 100%, and then it gets repainted. At the moment, I have not had enough time to talk to the owner, but I would like to say to the owner, you know, he has already applied. He took the drawings and they already applied for the permit to the building department. So that has been submitted. I don't think that it's, you know, that was just late last week. I don't think that that's been approved yet. I told the owner we are scheduled out probably at least 6 or 8 months. So if we're contracted this work, this is going to happen next year. And what I would propose to the owner is basically coming in right now, removing the loose deteriorated materials that are hanging on the front of the building, wrapping the parapet wall with a appropriate construction netting so that nothing else that might come loose could fall down and hit the pedestrians below. And basically it'll have to set until it comes up on our schedule. In the meantime, I would like to tell the owner that he should talk to the architect and maybe update the color scheme. But at the moment, you know, I'm sure that the drawings in my proposal would just reflect that it's repainting the same colors. But I did this work to the owner through Frost Building Maintenance. We have 2 companies, Frost Building Maintenance and Frost Architectural Preservation. I bid this as Frost Building Maintenance, and we've been in business 28 years, and this is bread and butter work for us. All we do is repair and restoration work, and repointing, cleaning, caulking, painting, and rebuilding the brickwork is, again, very, very simple, basic stuff for us. The owner was uncomfortable addressing you. He figured that if there were any technical questions that I would be better to field those. That's why I'm here instead of him. So go on down to the next page. Just some details. You can see that there's a bow in the upper parapet wall. It's leaning back toward the roof. And as part of our proposal, there's 2 long stretches of sandstone and a small upper section where the parapet wall rises a little bit. And on that section in the center, they had capped it with precast concrete wall caps. And the building was built in 1885. So I know that the precast is not correct. I would basically try to get sandstone caps that match the rest of the wall. And when we rebuild the wall, I intend to reuse all of those sandstone caps. So that's it in a nutshell, and I'm more than happy to answer any and or all questions.
Greg, can you just really quickly tell us what types of materials you would use in terms of the mortar and the paint? And
yes, okay. So as far as the mortar goes, in rebuilding the upper parapet wall, we're going to use a high lime mortar, but it will be a lime mortar that is blended with a small amount of Portland because we're rebuilding that wall with brand new brick. I'm not going to try to find 1885 brick, and the brick are starting to decompose as it is. When we disassemble the upper wall, we are going to salvage as many of those bricks as possible to be used for repairs on the lower sections. So the upper wall rebuild is going to be a brick veneer with a concrete block backup, but the roofing on the backside of the wall will come all the way up and cover the concrete block. We would put an aluminum flashing to cover from the under the capstones over the roofing, and then the capstones would be reset. Being that the lower section of the building is 100% repointing and it is built in 1885, that is going to be a 100% hydrated lime mortar. We're going to go right back to the original, and it's going to be 100% mortar removal, you know, grind, clean, wash, and repoint using the original mortar that's really much softer and a much more forgiving as far as being inserted into a brick wall like this. When all of the repairs are done and the trim is done, we would probably paint. It's previously painted and we do not anticipate stripping. So we would do probably a full coat of Sherwin-Williams Loxon masonry primer, which is going to seal all of the new brick and all of the mortar. And then we would top it with Sherwin-Williams super paint. It's just one of their higher quality exterior paints.
Did the owner say if there was any intent to update? You mentioned you would recommend a color update, but to update the signage at all either as part of this?
He has not addressed any of that. Right now,
Okay.
he is simply being reactionary to the violations. I spoke with the manager of the bookstore, and they are actually putting money into the space and they're upgrading. So I think that, again, this is 8 months down the road. I think that I would probably push the owner to say, you know, all of the signage has to come off. We're going to build scaffold and do these repairs. When we're done, now is the time to either change the paint color scheme and signage, and I mean, really the whole 9 yards. I mean, it might be another trip back before the committee for signage approval and color approval. But, you know, at this point, again, he has been reactionary, and my role so far has just been structurally to quote the repairs.
It would be an opportunity for storefront. Sorry, Marika, go ahead.
I was just saying that bookstore isn't horizontal anymore. It's a new bookstore. But
Oh,
yeah, I
it is?
agree. I think, yeah, I believe so. The signage outside is different now.
Okay,
Or it still says horizontal on the awning,
I
but,
was gonna say,
on
I
the
just took
storefront-
those photos yesterday.
oh, really? Maybe I'm
Yeah.
wrong. And I swear I've driven past it recently. I haven't been in, but I believe that yes, if you look at that picture, see on the actual storefront glass, it has a different name. I
Oh,
think I
yes.
don't know if they sold it or they just rebranded from the horizontal name, see Index
Okay.
Books and Coffee.
Yes,
So that would make sense to me if they are interested in kind of having a more, prominent street presence. That they
Yes.
might be interested in taking advantage of storefront.
and I have told the owner that regardless, if we need to put scaffolding to do the work, the awning, Nate's Deli, has to come down, and I would, whenever we do a job like this, I recommend that the people that are leasing on the first floor to have some vinyl banners made, and we attach them to our scaffolding just to let people know that they're still in business and open.
Could you tell us about the window trim work in more detail, what that's about? I can't see that all that well from this photo.
On the upper windows there, they had windows replaced, and they framed them with like a rough cedar, and they installed them from the inside. So they basically put some framing around the outer brick, installed the windows, anchored them, and they trimmed them nicely on the inside. When you look from the inside, you don't see any gaps, but on the outside, when they installed the trim, there are some gaps between the brick and the trim, and it either needs to be caulked, but some of the gaps are 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. I had recommended, simply pulling off that exterior trim and trimming it with the appropriate size, and then painting them all, when we paint the whole facade.
And what are the windows? Are the windows wood sash or are they aluminum clad or?
I think that they're aluminum clad replacement windows, yeah. And I don't know when they were installed. Actually, the trim on the outside looks weathered. And since the second floor is at the time an unused space, you know, it may have been a few years.
Well, it sounds like you have an appropriate program. I would request that just for administrative purposes, if you could, unless it's in your proposal somewhere already, you know, write out what you told us you were going to do in terms of kinds of mortar you're going to use and what locations and so forth, just so that's clear for everyone at Landmark. You get approved.
It is funny. I did a base proposal for the owner with a budgetary number, and but I told him, I said, I can't give him a firm number until after the meeting, just because of if anything else comes up. So I will definitely revise our proposal to specify all of those issues, and then once he gets it, he can forward it to you.
Great. So you're not, are the window hoods stone and painted or unpainted? The stone, the sills and the window heads on the second floor, do you know, or is just the brick painted?
No, unfortunately, everything is painted. The decorative window headers are actually stamped metal. They're painted a nice stone color, and it would give you the impression that they are limestone or sandstone. But when I was on the roof yesterday and I could get very close, that band at the base of the parapet wall and those window headers are all stamped metal. So those will be inspected and repaired and repainted. The sills are stone, but they have been painted.
Well, does anyone else have any additional questions? It sounds like you have an appropriate program outlined here.
Yeah.
I appreciate your attention to the detail and the proper use of the historic mortar. So I have no further questions or issues.
Good, thank you.
In that case, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve with the suggestion that the owner look into the storefront renovation program for colors and signage, should those be changed.
I'll second.
Nate, please call the roll.
Okay, Doug Wall,
Yes.
Alex Frondorf,
Yes.
Margaret Land,
Aye.
Antonio Marinucci,
Yes.
Chris Lozier,
Yes.
and Marika Clark.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And our next applicant is the West 48th Townhomes. This was approved in 2020 by design review, but they have some site changes that they need to go through the process again for. So I believe Jeff Foster's here to present. Jeff, I have the other presentation from 2020. If you want me to refer to that at all during the presentation, just let me know.
Okay, thanks. Thanks everybody for hearing us today. Yeah, this was a project back in February of 2020 that was approved and had gone to Landmarks. A couple other folks we have on the call today too is we have Caleb Fay and Mike Maroos, who are also the development partners on the project. Caleb or Mike, is there anything you wanted to kind of introduce for the project before I keep going?
Yeah, sure. This is Mike Maroos. Just wanted to thank, the committee for hearing about our project today. We, Caleb and I came together to look at this project. it had a life prior to COVID, and I know he was excited to get it off the ground. And everything had happened over the last 2 years, and it ended up being a great thing because we came together earlier this year and looked at the project to bring it back to life, and we're really excited about where we are today as far as the design and site plan. And we have our sales and marketing team pretty excited about the product that we're putting out there. And again, just want to thank everyone. We brought Jeff on board. He does excellent design. Real happy with where we're at today, and excited to move forward.
Great. So to take you through the project, so this first slide here is giving you the intro to the site. It's between Detroit and Franklin, 48th Street on the west side. So you can see from the somewhat C shape of the site, there is a property sort of in front of our site that is there that's not part of this project. And then there's a little bit of an access easement on the southern side. We're not proposing any work with that access easement. We're just kind of showing you on that site image where that's located. So the pictures that you're seeing starting at the bottom, that's showing you what it looks like from 48th Street. And then we sort of work your way around. Image 2 then is the head-on view into the site. Image 3 kind of looks up that access easement that I mentioned. Image 4 is from the north. So there's an adjacent commercial property, well, there's a residential property and then a large commercial parking lot that has some visibility to the inside of our site. So that's a view that becomes important. And then a couple other images from looking down the street. If you want to move on, Nate, to the next one. So from a site plan perspective, as Mike mentioned, we've made some changes to it. Those changes, what we're pretty excited about is, yes, it added a few more units, but what we feel has improved greatly is what the impression is for the neighborhood. So we've reoriented the site. The plan before had somewhat of a P-shaped circulation. So you entered in and made a turn towards the center of the site. But what we've done is we've kind of organized that in more of a linear fashion. So we have 3 basic unit types over 5. We're calling them 5 buildings. So the first of those is building number 1, which we're calling Unit A. It's a single family home. That'll be located up on West 48th. The premise that the project was developed with before, which is still pretty important, is playing a riff on the single family form. The A shape, or the sort of gable end facing towards the street. So as we get into the design, you can see that that's important, and that's remained. Unit types B and C are then within the site. So we have 2 narrower Bs which form building 2. And then we transition onto a C unit, which is more of a traditional townhouse unit with garages facing inward and entrances facing outward. So from a circulation standpoint, this is following the townhouse overlay guidelines. So we have a maximum 18-foot drives all the way through. Our entrance drive is actually 16 feet. So we can allow for a little more landscape buffer either side of the drive and around the single family residence. And then back internal to the site has an 18-foot drive. We've got a fire truck overlay on here. So you see a big dashed red line. That's demonstrating to the fire department the 150-foot hose length, and then their pumper truck pulled into the site. So this plan, I'm not going to go through all of the landscaping, but we have the landscaping shown, its locations on here. And later on in the presentation, you'll see what the different proposed plant types are for that. Paving wise, the darker gray color would represent our asphalt paving, and then the lighter gray color would be where we have sidewalks. So our sidewalks and asphalt, we've clearly delineated where the walking path is, but they are flush with one another. So the intent is that those 2 merge together and form a common muse through the site. There's a more recent development which we're showing on this site as well. Towards the southern edge of the property, you see 2 existing residences. Those are the dark colored kind of columnar shaped houses that are next door. So we wanted to show, we thought it was important to show how they relate to our development as well. Oh, Nate, you want to roll on to the next slide? So the next couple of slides just take you through the floor plans of the different units. So this would be our unit type A, which is very similar to what was presented back in 2020. Next slide.
Excuse me, Jeff. Did you say that you have more units than you had the last time we reviewed this?
So we have 12 units now. And trying to remember what was in the previous proposal.
Doug, prior the project was approved, I believe from 11 to 13 units. The site plan that was prior was 11 units. So we added 1 unit.
I see. All right, thank you.
So going into some of the other unit types, this is our unit type B, which is more of a square format. These are all 3-story units with rooftop decks, ground floor garages, ground floor entries. Next slide. All the units are 1,600 square feet as well. And then we're calling this our C-type unit, which is more of a traditional townhouse setup. And then this plays itself across the rest of the site. Next couple slides are elevations. So these show the distribution of the material. So this is our building 1, which is our single family residence. You can see the form and the shape of this is much like what was approved before. In fact, it's the exact same design as what was approved before. In terms of scale and proportion, it's meant to fit in with that scale along 48th. We're really sensitive to how the scale of that really is important and how those residences relate to each other and how they relate to the street edge. This unit is it's a 2.5, we'll call it a 2.5 story. So it's 2 full stories with a partial occupied level at the 3rd towards the rear. And then a rooftop deck. Our rooftop deck is oriented towards the rear of the site as well, so that we can keep the scale, the shape and form of that single family house along 48th Street. Next slide. So these start to show you, these happen to be from buildings 2 and 3. We've got some notations on here of some of our ground floor openings for the townhouse code that show our percentage of window opening that we're providing. The composition of the outside of these show a little better in the renderings, but we're using metal as the primary material on the exterior. So we have 3 different colors of metal that we're cladding these in. And then we have a base of brick that wraps around the base. And we feel that does a good job to anchor the form. It's a darker colored brick, but it also gives a nice wear layer around the base of the building. So you can see from the top of the building, we're picking up on that traditional kind of residential vernacular, so that feel really kind of plays across the site. Next slide. Another set of elevations, kind of more of the same. We'll get on to some pretty pictures here, which are always more interesting to look at. So these are some views from 48th Street. So, the renderings are actually exactly the same because the position of it, the composition of the materials is very similar to show you how that fits in with the houses that are to the north and to the south of the site. I mentioned before the view from the commercial parking lot next door. So that's that view number 1 and how that positions itself behind the adjacent property and what you'll be able to see from Detroit. The top of this page then shows you how the scale of that single family residence fits in nicely with the surrounding context. And then that gap that you see, that becomes our entrance drive back into the heart of the site. Next slide. So some of the views, and this is what kind of excites us about what the transition has been from the previous proposal. So the image in the lower right, this is the view from 48th, sort of as you get past that single family residence. What does it look like as you're looking into the site? And what excites us about this is you can see clear through and you have a clear sky view at the opposite end of the property. And we feel like that's important because it helps to reduce the scale, even though we've added 1 unit to this and we have density kind of on the north and south side of the site. You keep a vista through the site that makes it feel more open, and it's open to the vegetation, i.e. the trees, and to the sky beyond. So we feel that helps to kind of diminish the apparent scale of it, even though the units then sort of face out to the 2 adjoining properties. So as you enter in, we have landscaping planks either side of the entrance drive. That asphalt and concrete walk then merge together. And as you enter into the site, then we're playing with the composition of 3 different colors on those metal sidings. The one being a titanium white, which has a vertical rib to it. So that's everything that you see in white on these. And then there's 2 different shades of corrugated metal, one in a lighter gray and one in a darker charcoal gray. And we're using those in conjunction to differentiate the different units and also to give the forms of the building some texture. Roof forms, the bird's eye view, this would be the view that no one really ever sees, but just gives you a perspective of how the units fit together. We have asphalt shingles on the sloped roof surfaces. And you can see from the ground level view that we've picked up on that gable form as well. We've cut some openings into that where we have rooftop decks, but we've carried through a few structural elements to keep that form and to keep that shape. Landscaping we're using to soften some of the edges so that the views that you see in 3, 4, and 5 on the left show we're ringing the site with some more vertical types of planting materials, things that are drought resistant, things that are going to hold up well over time, but to just help soften the edges. So I mentioned how the darker colored brick forms a base to the building. You know, that gives a nice firm anchor. And then from a window perspective, we have white vinyl. We looked at using a darker color, but it just became a little too heavy, a little too oppressive. So we found that the white kind of softens things up and brightens it up a bit. Next slide, which I think is our last one, is our material palette. So you can see in the lower left there are different shades of gray. The darker gray next to the white is actually one we're not going to be using. We sort of took that out at the last minute. So we have the titanium white, and then the 2 grays up above are our 2 shades of corrugated, and we'll be using those to correspond with the different unit types. The brick, it's a US brick. In the lower right-hand corner is a sample of that. And then just a simple 3-tab shingle, so it's nothing dimensional. It's meant to be a very flat surface for the asphalt shingles. And then our lighting is just up over garage doors and over entrance doors. Very simple black, all down light fixture, just to light the walkways and light the entrances. So I mentioned planting material. There's our proposed species, which are actually the same ones that were proposed back in 2020. We didn't see any reason to change. They still fit with the feel. They still fit with the look we're trying to achieve. And we think they'll be good solutions to this compact site. So I think that was everything in our presentation. And I will open it up for questions.
Given that this is a totally different project than the one we reviewed 2.5 years ago, I think this should be reviewed as conceptual at this point. I think there's too much here to discuss for this to be up for final review. It's just a preliminary procedural matter.
So I guess I would question how substantially it is different from the last.
Well, we could have Nate pull up the other ones and we could take a look. But this is, you've increased the density, the design, the windows, the materiality is entirely different. You know, use of vinyl windows, use of corrugated metal. That's not a building material for a historic district. That's what you build a barn out of. And these look
Site layout also seems completely different also.
Yeah. Yeah. And not to be too harsh, but the Secretary of Interior Standards requires individualization for townhouses. And these are copy and paste jobs oscillating from one to the next. And they have the outward appearance of being human filing cabinets. I mean, they're not befitting the historic district and they're not adhering to the Secretary of Interior Standards. I think this requires a lot of revision and a lot of discussion on that. And so that's why I was proposing this be conceptual at this point.
Well, I would support that viewpoint, Alex, that I think, I mean, whether we call it preliminary or, conceptual or not, I think from what you said, I agree with what you said, and there are more issues that you didn't bring up that I'm sure are in your head that most of us have. And so I don't think we're in any way prepared to give final approval to this at this time. So I guess to just kind of go on to the next level, if you were to scroll back up, Nate, to the rendered elevations there on that page, yes. Let me ask the question about the one at the top left and the middle left, or mostly the top left. Are those second floor facades all flush with one another, or if there is some variation in depth from one unit to the other, how much is there? Because I can't make that out from this.
So those units are flush to one another. So I guess I'd like to take a step back. If we're at a preliminary review stage, Nate, could you bring up the previous submission? I want to make sure everybody's sort of familiar with what was previously approved, because substantially the materials are consistent. What was proposed for all the finishes before were metal. In fact, the design that faces out to the right of way, which is where the National Park Service's guidelines really are, it's what's visible to the site, are exactly really the same. So if you want to run down through the elevations here, there's some views of the, and we specifically took the same views to show you what those are.
See, that's a different layout there.
Right, so let's look at that site plan just for a second, go back to that. And there's a lot more variety in the surfaces as you move along your little alleyway and into the courtyard. That was one of the things I think we all liked about it, you know, regardless of the material, that there was some massing differential going on as you went down here instead of just a big row of flat fronts. That seems incredibly different than what this is.
Nate, are you able to show both like side by side in your window? Because I think that might be helpful since part of this conversation seems like it's comparing the previous submission.
So one important thing to note about the previous site plan came down to economics, which is one of the reasons it was stalled in moving ahead, is that plan is extremely expensive to build, frankly. And we had to make some changes just to make it practical.
In what way?
Yeah.
Could you describe what it was about that made it unaffordable for you?
It had to do with all the things that you like the most, the ins and outs, the shape of it. You know, we had such a variety in different building types and building styles that when you put all of that together, you know, the economics of it just didn't work.
I mean, do you see that? Do you see that difference there? Look at that. And then go to the other one, Nate. I mean, we can all agree that's very different, right?
Yeah, and there's no, I'm not going to disagree with you. And it has to do with the units to the rear, because our unit Bs and the units up towards the front are exactly the same. So there is still a relief at the garage. So as you enter in, the garage face is recessed back. And where we did make the changes is at the rear of the site. That's exactly what we did change.
Jeff, can you clarify, are you the architect on the project or are you the developer?
Architect.
Okay. And thank you for your presentation, but I'm not sure how this project we've also seen in many different iterations and life cycles over the past maybe 4 or 5 years. But I hope you can also appreciate, yes, obviously the unit facing the street in the front is one thing, but we have to review the entire project, you know, to the standards of the landmarks district, regardless of how deep it goes or you know, how visible things are. And I agree with my colleagues that this is essentially, you know, a new iteration beyond that first house that needs to be reviewed on its own merit. I don't know if it's, I'm just a little bit torn. I don't know that it helped your argument to compare it to the previous submission. I almost think maybe we need, you know, I don't know, Nate or Carl, if you can give guidance, like should we be reviewing this on its own merit instead of comparing it to the previous submission? Because to me, they feel substantially different, that they need to be this is just a new project for the site.
Well, I think it's useful to compare the two just at this point because the presenters seem to think,
Yeah, I guess it was
different,
presented
where
that way to us.
we all seem to think it's considerably different, not really the same project.
And Jeff, you know, a lot of those things, like you said, that were eliminated because of cost. I mean, there was a lot of back and forth and massaging of the previous design to kind of achieve those elements. This was a difficult site and a difficult project historically. So that's why we as the committee feel that this is a lot different, because it is looking at, you know, if we are going to compare to the last one, there were, you know, probably 4 or 5 meetings with different changes and finessing of that design to get to the approval point. So that's, you know, we're not trying to dog on you or beat up on this.
No, I could totally respect that. And I obviously wasn't part of those hearings, but
Yes.
you know, but what I can compare is I can compare the final result, you know, the final result of all those meetings and all that back and forth. And I'm looking at that and we want to draw from that. What was the essence of it? What were the most important elements that led us to that? So obviously, as we look at the design, you know, we looked at the materiality. Those units were previously covered in metal. You know, they had metal siding on the outside of them, so that's, you know, consistent. And when we look at the units next door that were recently constructed, those 3-story sort of tower elements, they have corrugated metal on them. So there's you know, that precedent is kind of in that area adjacent to it.
Jeff, I'm not seeing corrugated metal on the prior materials list. I don't know if I'm missing that, but I'm
So
seeing standing seam metal and I'm seeing a lot of ground floor wood, which seems to be entirely absent from the new design. Is that accurate?
that is correct. And that ground floor wood is just not an appropriate. It's just, you know, that's just not in the cards for the base of this building. It wouldn't wear well for a condo project, nor would it weather well long-term for a good solution. So as a team, we thought that's why we switched that to brick. We thought the brick would wear better. It would be a better long-term solution for the area. So Nate, if you want to bring up the material list from the previous submission, you know, we'll kind of get beyond the site plan. Go to the exterior materials. Yeah, right back there. There you go. So vertical interlocking metal panels, you know, there's a majority of those exterior elevations were covered in that.
Right,
And
but that's different than a corrugated metal, isn't it?
It is. It is.
Or the ribbed metal panels, your vertical interlocking metal panel, it presents a smooth surface, and the ribbed panel gives you all these ribs, and the ribbed and the corrugated, I think, as a combination without the relief of some of these other siding materials, just gives it too much of an industrial container look without the warmth of any of these other materials. And so, I mean, just for example, just throwing out there, I would say, you know, what if you ditch the corrugated and put wood in and, you know, as a contrast to add some warmth? I think at the very least that would,
right. Or even the fiber cement board panels that are called out in the previous design as an alternative to wood. If you feel like wood, it doesn't weather well.
Well, I guess this is Mike Maruz. I think, you know, we went into this with the intention to reference the old site plan, considering it is approved, you know, 2 years ago. Yes, there's been changes. There needed to be changes to bring the project back to life. I think we could probably talk about what it was and what it is today. I guess maybe we just need to move forward and say, okay, what issues do we have with the current site plan and how do we move forward?
I think the biggest, I think some major ones are just the lack of variation in the site plan and the facade as well as the site plan. I wasn't part of the previous discussions, but the previous, especially if you go to slide 20 on the previous submission, you see quite a bit of variety and it feels more like sort of an organic neighborhood design. And I think that's kind of what we're looking for, to differentiate each townhouse from the other. So I think the variety and the facade depth that Doug called out would be an important one. And then the materiality would be another big one for me. I would strongly suggest taking out the corrugated metal and replacing that with a different metal or a different material, preferably one that isn't metal, to, as Doug said, bring a bit more softness and warmth to this project.
I agree 100% with Marika's comments. And I would also urge a different treatment or application of the rooftop decks. The way that they're done, those dog houses there, you know, the prior rendering treated those, I think, a lot more sensitively to the historic district. I couldn't support those on this project.
I'd like to go back.
If I could add.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I just want to make a comment about building form. So you have this image up on the screen. I want to kind of stress something, that the relief that you see on this rendering has to do with the roof shape. I mean, if you look at the facades of these buildings, they're flat. So I guess I don't want to misconstrue the shape of the top of the building with the
They're not-
facades.
The issue is more that they're not flat. They're not all flat to each other, if that makes sense. So you can
Right.
make out different
They're about
units that are,
changing the way the light hits it and spaces that create, spaces behind others. Just follow the right-hand side of your driveway going down there. You've got two units that are flush to each other, and then you've got the next two units that bump out in a considerable fashion. So that really gives you some variety in the way the lights hit it, and you've got significant variation in roofs between those two types of units. And that's the kind of variety that's going to make this seem more like an organic addition to the neighborhood.
the way that
Yeah, I think the one-
street turns the corner also, I think also helps that, where you have those two units that sort of sit in the middle of the grid. So it breaks up the really strict kind of hallway feel of the current design.
I think something that we struggled with a lot in the previous, in approving this site is that it is a slot development, which from an urban form standpoint is not ideal for many reasons. However, I think the previous submission had, like what we keep saying, this kind of more like an organic kind of pocket type of feel, whereas this current site plan does go back to a very traditional, just kind of slot style. And that's what's in all of these kind of elements, the lack of variation between differentiating, which are criteria for the landmarks district, are missed in this. And I think that's needs to be improved upon in order for us to kind of stomach the approval of a slot development, especially with an increase in unit count.
Agreed. Fully agree.
Yeah, there's got to be a middle ground here somewhere instead of going, it seems like you've gone all the way down to the lowest common denominator. These last 6 units are just mirror images of each other, 6 garage doors and 6 facades mirroring each other. That's as much like a prison cell environment. I don't care what materials you put on it. It's just no variety there. And then thinking about wayfinding, the last 3 units on both sides, are directly in alignment, but there's like what, a 5 or 6 foot walkway between the units. How are you going to propose to do wayfinding that people can come back and figure out where the front doors are for those people's units? And that again, in that last stretch of 6 units, there's no landscaping. It's just an alleyway. I mean, that's which is considerably different than the last version. So I just have to believe there's some kind of way to create a middle ground here. That I understand that all the variety of unit types and ins and outs and so forth of the last one may have put you over budget, but this is 5 pounds in a 4-pound bag.
In the logistics of a slot house, I mean, it's a very office-centric development. If a car is coming in and the car is coming out, someone's going to have to back all the way back up. There's no, and it's not very pedestrian friendly, especially as you get to the western half of the development. And look, I was never a huge proponent of this logic, but I observed it this past winter. If you get a snow plow, it's going to go into the west, where there's no base to plow anything up on either. I mean, it's too compact.
Alex, this is Caleb. I have carried the project for 4 years. I always meet with you, and you always raise all these questions. Here, we want to improve the project. We deal with 4 parties. We deal with design review, planning, landmark, and the fire, and the building department. We have to meet all the requirements by all parties. This is intention of design review. I get it. I appreciate all your feedback. And I know you want it recognized dynamic, but that's not reality. We cannot meet the fire code. We cannot construct this way. I try to contribute to the area, the community, but seems like it's impossible. We come back, we want to improve the site and the construction so it can bring to life. But now all the negative feedback, I feel like I cannot improve it. If you want me to go back, I can go back. But I got all the resistance from fire department and the building department. So here, I just want to know how you want us to improve it so you can prove the project. You didn't like the doghouse before either. Now you like me to go back. You asked about the snow problem. We answered you and you proved. So I don't think we need to discuss all these questions we have discussed many times before. I just like to know if there's a way I can improve it and bring to life, I like to do. Otherwise, I think this is the last time I'll see you.
I think we all have provided the feedback in ways that we think the project needs to be improved. And I think every last one of us has, so.
So, okay, then that's proved by design review, but fire department won't prove it. So I think I have no choice. I can sit here forever. The land can sit there, but that's no good, no value to the community at all.
I think Doug's comment is the summation of all of our comments. You're trying to squeeze 5 pounds of flour into a 4-pound bag. I mean, and that is the source of a lot of these issues, is it's trying to do too much, too little.
Are you saying that the fire department didn't approve the previous design? Is that what you're
Because of this P shape, we need to allow the fire truck go through the property.
Oh, I see. Because of the T
Yeah,
shape.
because we provide the demanding view according to the design review, but we never thought about other departments.
I see. So, Nate, can you go back to the previous site plan? So you're saying that this site plan doesn't work for the fire department because they need to be able to drive all the way through the entire site?
Right. Because
Yeah.
I don't own the site south.
Right.
So what if the southwest building, they got a fire?
Right. No, I get, and I don't think that we're necessarily saying that the only way we will approve this is if you return to this site plan. I think we all understand that there are constraints on the tight site. I think that what we're suggesting is, as Doug said, there's got to be a middle ground where there are, even if you substantially keep the site design, but make changes to the facades themselves, the materials, landscaping, there are other things that you could do to modify your current site plan in order to kind of achieve some of the suggestions that we're making.
Right, this is very helpful. Okay, our standpoint now is we can keep the current site plan. I like to.
Others agree with that. I don't want to if other people disagree with that. That's sort of my opinion. Is I can understand, especially if fire department is not going to approve this site plan. I can understand this is a very tight site. It's a slot development, but so my point is, assuming that they really don't have any other way other than keeping substantially the current site plan, are there ways that they can modify the designs of how the individual units interact with each other, modify the materials, modify other elements of the landscaping and other, window layouts, all of those things?
Yeah, that's
in a
why
way
I
that
say I appreciate this feedback. At least we have a start point to refine it, to change the material, change the color. I think we can do it. But something if impossible, we cannot do it. We keep the original site plan, we cannot do it. Then I have to ask a way how we can improve. If everybody okay with the current site plan, then I'll ask the next question, how you like to see the design so it can meet your requirement. If that's doable, we will do everything to meet your requirement. I still want to go. I don't give up. If I give up, I give up many times during this whole process.
I think, if I can, Caleb, we are all, would not disagree with you that developing in the city of Cleveland and following all these steps is not an easy process, pain in the ass. However, I hope you can also appreciate that this board's job is to uphold the Secretary of Interior standards. It's not, we're not going off of made up criteria, nor are we going off of our personal opinions. We are tasked with, approving projects that make that meet these standards. And you're also developing at will. So it's really difficult from our perspective when developers come and say things like, well, just tell me what I need to do to get approved. That's really not what the process is meant to do. You guys are presenting something to us, we're reacting and giving feedback. It's up to you and your design team to take that feedback and meet the criteria. We can't be put in a position where we're saying do X, Y, Z and you'll get approved. That's not how it works, nor would that be a kosher way of us as a body.
Yeah, this
I
understand. Everybody they have their own responsibility. We have our own responsibility too. The issue I'm dealing with, and which is very frustrating, I got approved here. Then next step, I got kick it back. I got approved by Landmark. Then next step, I go fire, I go building, I get kicked back. So I always go in circle, and with planning, we deal with other issues too. That's why I simply ask, if there's something you can let us know we can do, we will do. If not, I just go around. Someone mentioned it, that's a 4 years.
So, did you take note of the suggestions that we made earlier in this conversation around facade variety, changing materials, removing the corrugated metal?
Roof variation,
Yeah.
I think, was another comment that.
I just put in the chat, number 9 of the Secretary of the Interior standard. And I believe that covers what we're saying. So if you think about your new work, look at the historic buildings. What are those materials? What do homeowners of those historic buildings have to use when they're doing renovation and rehabilitation? What is the massing? What's the scale? What's the material? What's the quality of the material in the historic district? And I think that is what you should be basing your choices on.
And I agree. I think it's those feedback doable, and I'm willing to make the change. But if the site plan is not appropriate to most of you, then I don't think I have an idea how to improve it. So I try to get a sense, the site plan, that's something you think is doable, then we can improve from there.
Nate or Carl, if he's on this call, I need some clarification to respond to that question. Does this also get approved by city planning, or are we the design track approval process for like that site plan?
The city planning pre-approved it.
They approved this.
It has to be reviewed under townhouse code.
Got it.
But this is the track that it would take. But I think planning may have looked at it from the site plan and lot splits and such like that.
So this is going to be, they are the ones that are converting,
Yes,
I'm guessing
we do
like
not.
RA3 townhome
I believe it's being reviewed right now.
being
The
reviewed. Okay.
townhouse- The townhouse code, though, does say that it must be compatible with, I don't know the exact words, but with, basically with the district, the surroundings. And that's why,
Yeah. I still think that, you know, my comments from earlier that if you are looking for approval for a traditional slat site plan, that we do need to see, we need to see like improvements per the criteria that Margaret added to the chat to make sure that you're hitting, you know, as many of the points that the district requires as you can. I would personally like to see, I would love a little visual. I will compliment, and I think like obviously we haven't focused on what I think is being really successful about this site plan. Really appreciate the clustering and the breaking up of the units and not just doing a wall of 8 units. That helps. So I think I would love to see, if possible, a tiny bit of the push and pull, whether it's by the building blocks or by the units themselves. I think that could help from a physical standpoint. Yeah, I think that you can massage that a little bit and help provide that variation in subtle ways, if that's helpful. You know,
so as a designer, we hear that loud and clear, you know, and to Margaret's point, you know, I think there's some liberty within that. You know, we know those NPS guidelines really well, and you know, we are sensitive to that, and I would guess I would agree. Yeah, the repetitiveness of the materials through here is against that. But I guess we just need to show you how this fits within the neighborhood better, because we feel like it does, especially when we look at the neighboring development next door and how most of this is not visible from the street. You know, it's primarily visible from the people next door. I mean, the views we're showing you from overhead, even the rendered views from within the site, the only way you could see those is to go down the driveway of the house that's in front of us to capture that view. So it's important that we look at this development of what you'll actually see. And I don't disagree that we need to work on the ins and outs, and we need to work on the breakdown of the facade, and that's our takeaway on the design for sure.
Yeah,
Jeff,
if I could, sorry, if I could just interject one comment. Actually, go ahead, Nia. Sorry, I cut you off.
Just like with respect to, I don't know if I can speak for everybody, but like we are very, very familiar with the context of the neighborhood. That's why we have local design review committees, because we are tasked with being very familiar. The development you're referring to is not in the district. That abuts to this. So I don't know that that's going to be a very effective argument for your case. And like I said at the beginning of this review, we still have to, any new construction needs to be evaluated from all sides. And it needs to be, it's not just about what's visible in this case, because this is a broader development than just a single family home with a primary facade. I hope you can appreciate that. So I do think that we need to,
we'd like to see the neighbors get a decent view too. Say, oh, well, you can't see this from the street, so who cares what the neighbors are looking at? You know, I look at the properties to the south, you know, they're in their backyards. What are they looking at? They're looking at a big flat wall with a gap in it for those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units that are a big flat facade with, you know, that's unacceptable to me as well.
But just so we're clear, the property that I'm referring to is the one immediately to the south. So is that not part of the district?
No way that would have gotten approved.
yeah, you're talking
Those
about
are
the black column type development. Yeah. The answer is no, those are not in the district. I know that seems, yes, and I agree. That would not have been the result.
Sorry to interject. We have Carl Brunches with Cleveland Landmarks Commission with his hand raised. So Carl, if you want to go ahead.
Chris had wanted to mention something first, and then I can go.
Oh, thanks, Carl. I appreciate that. I just wanted to point out, sort of a couple of things to maybe take a look at. If we compare slide 10 in the current submission and slide 17 of the previous submission, I think this gives a sense of kind of what we're asking for. So in the previous submission, with this rendering, it's sort of looking down, you know, between the two sides. And granted, there's, you know, the building at the end that sort of blocks the sky view. But you can see that the variety of materials, variety of, you know, roof shapes, and the scale of this feels much more residential and much sort of in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood. And when you look at sort of the lower right image in what we're seeing right now, I don't know, Nate, if you can zoom into that one, but it's much more sort of, you know, monolithic and, you know, very similar as you're looking down. So I think the idea is, how can you take what you have in this view here, add some variety to it in terms of massing and scale to help break down the sort of the more urban scale of this to something that feels a little bit more residential.
Okay. Just basically listening to what's been going on here. I think we want to keep this moving forward, but this sounds like it should be treated more of a conceptual review because there are a lot of questions and things have changed. And we still have to get our information back from Shannon Leonard in city planning on the townhouse review. I want to keep this on our agenda next week for landmarks, but I think we can put it there as a concept review as well. And then once all the feedback has been given, we can bring it back here for final review. And then Caleb, you and your team can take all the comments together and see what you can come up with. If you feel that you have received enough feedback at this point.
Yeah, I think those feedback are pretty valuable. Chris' request, I think it's valuable to make it more dynamic when we look the south building in terms of scale, massing, and texture. We can do some changes for that and consider the previous approved plan. We can make it closer to that. I think these are doable changes we can do.
I would not make any changes to this current presentation. Let's let the Landmarks Commission look at the same thing that the Design Review Committee has looked at today. This way,
okay.
And then you can take everything and then make your changes all together in one.
Okay, that's helpful.
And I think what would be helpful too, when you do present this again, is to help us understand what the commentary has been from Landmarks, so that we understand when we're reviewing again the commentary that was made by Landmarks, the commentary that was made by the building department or the fire department, because I think that would have helped us understand why the site plan changed from the previous, was because you were reacting to commentary from you know, building and housing and the fire department. And yes, I think that would have helped clarify the conversation earlier on. So thank you.
Okay, Chris, I agree with you. Like Doug said, the opinion from the neighborhood. Actually, we present to the block club and all the 5 neighbors adjacent to my site. They all wrote a support letter to me. They want to see activities, and I present 13 units that time, and they agree and support. They don't want to see vacant houses over there. They want to see activity. So I agree. We will gather all the comments together and share with you next time. And hopefully we make good improvements, can make you happy.
It will be also I'd also say include those letters of support from the neighbors as well, or at least a collective letter from the block club saying that they support this, because I think that will also help your case.
Okay.
Did the houses that we previously approved for demo get demoed? So the site is clear now?
No.
No,
there.
they're still existing. Okay, so
Yeah.
Carl, do we need to re-review the demo? I'm
Yeah, I
talking
want-
thinking for final.
I
or-
don't, I think you just
Okay.
have to, we can reapprove the previous C of A for the demos. And I think the permits have expired. You will have to reapply for new permits on those.
Yeah.
Because it's
With
been
the
more than
development.
6 months. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll do
But
it
yeah.
all together.
I have one little last question, just on the site plan. On the previous site plan, that little southern kind of alley was part of the, I guess, egress plan, and now it doesn't seem to be. Is that true?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's not necessary.
It's the driveway for the neighboring property next door, and we don't need it for access, and it's somewhat awkward to just have a walkway down through someone's driveway.
Oh, I see. So but it is on your property?
It is. In fact, do you want to go to a picture? Nate, go back to the first page of pictures. The photo in the lower left. Photo 3. That's that view. That's that piece of strip of property. It serves as the driveway to this house.
Okay,
On the right.
got it. All right, that makes sense. I personally thought it was sort of nice in the previous site plan how there was kind of a small pedestrian pathway over to those lower units. So I don't know, it's just another thing that I was looking at. It, you know, if there was a way to like include not a full, obviously, like if the residence in front uses it as their driveway, I don't want to disturb that. I didn't know like what the dimensions were, if there was room for anything. So if there's not room, then disregard.
But what's awkward about it is we tried to try and integrate that, but we couldn't make it not look like you're walking down somebody's driveway to get to the center of the site.
Got it.
Is there an emergency pedestrian egress from that side just in case if there was a fire that they don't have to come back and maybe using that an opening or a way for them to get through fencing to be able to exit down that driveway? Just
I don't believe there's any fencing, is there?
There is no fencing, so if the building's on fire, run like hell, I guess.
yeah, okay.
If you
There's not going to be any fencing proposed on behind privacy fencing behind the house there.
So go to the site plan, you can see where we have fencing proposed really just in one area. Zoom out a little bit, if you would, please. Up on the top side. We had a fence, I guess it's not noted on here, where we have the river rock behind building 2 that faces a neighbor's yard. In back, we were proposing a fence along that section. It doesn't have a note on it, but it's right up at the top of the page behind building 2. But we were not planning on any fencing on any of the other perimeter, mainly to make it blend in with the neighboring area around it. So even though it's a pocket development, it's lot development, we wanted those borders to be blurred so that it felt more open.
Okay, thank you.
If you go to the previous site plan, Nate, in the other presentation on slide 9, yeah, it's just that little pathway on the lower, like right at the lower edge. And then if you go to slide 20, back to that bird's eye view, I just thought it sort of almost had like a bit of a nice feel, that it just feels like there's like this other little sort of access point that makes this site just feel like it breathes a little bit more, that more southern little teeny pathway there. But it's not a critical element. I just was curious about it.
I think, I'm sorry guys, my baby's being like demonic right now with the screeching, but I think one of the qualities about that was so charming is that it made it feel like a little bit more, or maybe what I would hope to see out of the site plan is maybe feeling like there's a little bit more of a front door presence on that alley. It's always hard with slot developments to like, you know, what is someone really going to walk around and like visit the front door of these units when they're just kind of like so isolated. I don't know if you could play around with potentially, maybe, is there a unit type maybe where a few of these are one car, so you could pull the front foyer of the unit into that middle area so that we have a little bit more engagement. I just feel like it's going to be such a locked in auto court. I don't know if that's not, I guess, the most concise feedback, but there's something of that quality that might be nice to try to like revisit a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's kind of it. Yeah, sort of the same sentiment that I was sort of seeing that other little alley as just part of that sort of variation in access and front doors and just the pedestrian experience in.
Yes, and you know, the next level of that is this one, even though as you go further down the driveway there, the front doors are on the other side of the building, but when you get these two stacks of parallel identical units where you just have a row of garage doors on each side, that the banality of that floors me, you know, that you have to find your way around and think about this a little bit from between now and whatever you do next time, as far as wayfinding. What if some guest is going to come back down there? How the hell do they find your front door? If you live in one of those back 6 units, oh, I've got to take this little walkway, but nobody told me that. There's nothing to tell me that. And are you going to have expect the mail delivery to go on back there, or what's going to happen with garbage pickup? Garbage truck? Are you going to have these people all wheel their cans out to 48th Street? And so I don't expect you to answer those questions right now, but I think we need to, you know, talk about them before this gets approved.
One other suggestion, if Nate, sorry, could you go back to slide 10 of the current submission? Just one other thought on something that could sort of change up the sort of every single unit feeling the same on here is that one, like in rendered view 3, if you just scroll down slightly. Nate. No. Same slide. Just go down to it just was getting cut off a little bit on slide 10.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, right there. That last unit, that's the end unit. I feel like it's being treated right now as if like there's very few windows there. To me, that unit feels like a great opportunity to have a slightly different floor plan and like have some much nicer, larger windows on that. Like even from a sort of revenue perspective, like that unit could probably garner a higher number than the other ones, with the exception of the single family house facing the street, because it is a corner unit on 3 sides and would be able to have really beautiful large windows that open out to this open area. So I feel like that could be an example of a unit that could take advantage of the site plan to do something a bit different and also break up the monotony of all of these townhouses that look the same. Maybe that could work with the 2 units on the other side, but I don't know how much space there is between the edge of those units and the next buildings. But to me, that one feels like a big opportunity that to me right now feels like a missed opportunity to just have those really thin windows that look like they're just in a stairwell or something like that. So that could, to me, seems like low-hanging fruit that could also help your pro forma to reconsider how that unit is designed.
Yeah, I think, you know, just Mike Morris again. I think we, obviously appreciate the feedback. We need to go back and talk as a team. Unfortunately, the reality of the world is everything does come to economics. And as we all love that last site plan for a lot of reasons, it was never going to work. And sometimes reality hits you and you need to look at something different. And, we looked at this from a perspective of, how do we keep to a price point where the market's at today and give it some of the feel that it had in the last, facade design and concepting. So I think for us, we appreciate everything you're giving us in feedback, and we could do our best to try to make this work to where that we feel proud of it in the community. And, hopefully we could make everyone happy with the overall design and concept.
Obviously, we exist to combat the inexplicable drive to the bottom that capitalism requires. So, making the economic argument, yeah, there's some validity to it, but we can't give that all the weight in the world. Otherwise, there's no point in design.
To Mike's point, though, there's a middle ground, and that's, we'll get there. We all do this for a living, and I think we can come to a point where all of that can meet and can be in agreement. Obviously, we got some work ahead of us, so we'll address that.
All right, well, thank all of you. Sorry to surprise you with this criticism, but I think you've gotten the drift of where we think we'd like to see it go. And so tell your story to Landmarks and we'll see what they say.
Thanks for the feedback.
Thanks.
Okay, that was our last item on the agenda. So Doug, if you want to call the meeting to close.
I just have one quick thing here. That's the second meeting that Charlie's has not shown up. Is there a disconnect somewhere?
I reached out to Charlie's and she said she would be present for this. So I'm not sure.
I also reminded her, sorry, I'm kind of here. So she didn't respond. I guess she's just not into it.
Okay, just checking.
Nate, did you, oh my God, I'm so sorry guys, the baby is so screechy. Did you share Doug's feedback with them that he'd sent via email, that we just need a little bit more visual? We need to understand the height and everything.
Yeah, I can do that. I will I'll try to give her a call and see where she's at, and remind her that you can't really get signage till you present to the committee. So yeah, I can do that. I can reach out.
Yeah, we want to be supportive and small business. So I just don't want them to waste their time coming and then be told that again.
Right.
If they're,
All right, well, this meeting of the Ohio City Design Review Committee is adjourned officially. So thanks, everyone. And I think
Have a nice weekend.
Yes.